Welcome to your channel, Silent Mind Studio, and thank you for listening to us.
Great to be here.
Today, we're really plunging headfirst into a topic that, well, it feels incredibly cutting edge, doesn't it? Something you read about constantly right now.
Absolutely. Emotional AI, machine feelings, it's everywhere.
But its roots stretch back surprisingly far through human history. We're talking about humanity's long-standing, maybe even ancient quest to create machines that can not just process data, but perhaps genuinely understand, maybe even share our complex, messy emotions.
It's a fascinating continuity.
And this particular deep dive, it actually complements a previous exploration we did, so we're adding some crucial historical details today, filling in those earlier steps on the journey.
It's right. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to that earlier deep dive, we really do recommend checking it out.
Yeah, because these two episodes together, they really offer significant kind of connected insight into this absolutely fascinating research topic.
Definitely gives you the fuller picture.
We've got source material here that traces this whole quest, right, from some, well, surprisingly effective early programs that seemed almost magical back then.
With the foundational research, yeah.
To the complex technical challenges and, of course, the profound ethical questions we're grappling with today.
Still grappling with,
exactly. So our mission today is to really unpack this history, to trace the journey, look at the surprising detours, highlight those pivotal moments.
And really try to understand the deep implications of trying to teach machines this often confusing but beautiful language of human feeling.
So let's unpack this.
Let's do it. It really is fascinating how this isn't a purely modern impulse, you know? The desire to create artificial beings, automatons, constructs that feel or understand us, it echoes through ancient myths, stories.
Yeah, it speaks to something fundamental, doesn't it, in the human psyche?
I think so.
Absolutely. Think about it. We've always told stories about artificial companions, beings that somehow get us.
Right, like Pygmalion.
Exactly. Pygmalion, where the sculptor falls in love with his animated statue, Galatea, basically imbuing stone with life and feeling.
Or Frankenstein, maybe a darker take.
Oh, definitely. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, way back in 1818. It explores creating this sentient being that, more than anything, just longs for connection, for understanding, acceptance.
And feels such despair when it doesn't find it.
Precisely. There's this incredibly deep-seated wish, you see, to bridge that perceived gap between the made, the artificial, the constructed, and the born, the natural, the living, the feeling.
It's a powerful theme woven right into our collective imagination, maybe reflecting a desire for connection we sometimes struggle with even among ourselves.
That's a good point. And the first actual tangible sparks of machines trying to, let's say, converse emotionally, trying to simulate understanding in a way that actually resonated with humans. Well, that didn't really happen until the dawn of computing.
Right, and this is where the story gets really specific and, frankly, quite eye-opening.
And here's where it gets really interesting with actual machines, not just stories. We absolutely have to talk about ELIZA.
ELIZA, 1964, MIT, Joseph Weissenbaum.
That's the one. A deceptively simple program.
Yeah.
Weissenbaum designed it almost as a kind of experiment, maybe even a caricature.
Yeah, he wasn't trying to build true AI in the way we think of it now.
No, he was mimicking a specific style of human interaction, that of a Rogerian psychotherapist. Now, if you're not familiar, Rogerian therapy or client-centered therapy, it's all about empathetic listening, reflective responses.
The therapist often rephrases what the patient says, reflects it back, asks open-ended questions like, "Tell me more about that feeling," to help the patient explore their own thoughts.
Exactly. And ELIZA's mechanism, computationally speaking, was incredibly basic for what it seemed to achieve.
Oh, totally basic. It didn't understand concepts, no real-world knowledge. It was all pattern matching and substitution.
How did that work exactly?
Well, it would scan what you typed for certain keywords or phrases. If it found one, say, mother, it would apply a pre-programmed role associated with mother.
Like what?
So if you typed, "My mother always makes me feel sad," ELIZA might have a rule that spots, "My family member always makes me feel emotion."
Okay.
And it could transform that structure into something like, "Tell me more about your mother," or "Why do you feel sad about your mother?"
I see. Just rearranging the sentence based on templates.
Exactly. And if it didn't find a keyword, it recognized. It had fallback rules, like just reflecting the statement back as a question. You say you feel sad. Clever grammatical templates, a list of keywords, but zero genuine comprehension.
Zero understanding.
Okay.
And yet, the human response was absolutely astonishing, almost unsettlingly so.
Weizenbaum himself was reportedly shocked, maybe even disturbed by how readily people, even people who knew it was just a simple program running rules, attributed deep understanding, empathy, even sentience to it.
They projected all these complex feelings and intentions onto it. They felt genuinely heard by what was essentially, well, an elaborate script doing text tricks.
The anecdote about his own secretary is legendary, isn't it?
It is. She apparently asked him to leave the room so she could have privacy while interacting with this rudimentary chatbot.
People poured their hearts out, shared intimate details, raw emotions, as if they were talking to a real, sympathetic, understanding human confidant.
It's incredible. What does that tell us about us?
It highlights something profound about human psychology, I think. It's like there's this inherent, fundamental, human-shaped hole, that's a good way to put it, that we're always trying to fill.
The desire to be understood. To connect.
Exactly. To have someone, or maybe even something, listen empathetically without judgment. ELIZA's success, and like you said, it wasn't about technical sophistication, which was minimal, was entirely about its uncanny ability to tap into that incredibly powerful human need for an attentive, reflective listener.
So this phenomenon, this human readiness to project complex emotional depth onto a non-sentient system, it was more than just a curiosity.
Oh, absolutely. It wasn't just a fun party trick of early computing. It foreshadowed so much. Not just the enduring appeal we see now with AI companions and conversational agents,
but also the ethical complexities.
Precisely. The complexities we're still wrestling with today about how we interact with and perceive AI. It showed us, maybe a bit uncomfortably, our own remarkable readiness to believe, to attribute depth and feeling where, technically, none exists.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What does it mean that we are so quick, so ready to see empathy, to see understanding in what are essentially just simple patterns?
It feels less like a triumph of the technology back then and more like a revelation about our own deep-seated psychological needs.
A powerful starting point because it puts the human element right at the center from the get-go. We seem wired to seek and perceive connection.
We are, but for machines to get any closer to genuinely understanding us or even just interacting more naturally than ELIZA, they needed something more structured, a quantifiable method to decode the outward expressions of our feelings.
And for a long time, the most obvious place to look was the face.
The face, yeah. Seen as the primary canvas of emotion, the most direct external signal of our inner state.
Which brings us straight to the work of Paul Ekman. His research, starting in the 1960s, continuing into the 70s, it was absolutely foundational here, hugely influential.
He really dedicated his career to exploring this idea of universal emotional expression.
He proposed that now famous idea, right?
Yeah.
There's a set of basic fundamental emotions.
Happiness, sadness, anger, fear, surprise, disgust. Those core ones.
And crucially, his hypothesis was that each of these basic emotions has a distinct, recognizable facial expression that's common across all human cultures, regardless of language or background.
And it wasn't just a theory he floated. He actively sought empirical evidence. He and his colleagues conducted these extensive, really pioneering cross-cultural studies to try and demonstrate this universality.
The work with the 4 people in Papua New Guinea is probably the most famous example.
Exactly. The 4 people had had very limited contact with Western cultures or media at that time. Ekman's team would present them with stories designed to evoke specific emotions, and then ask them to pick the facial expression from a set of photographs that matched the story. Or they'd ask the 4 people to show what their face would look like if they felt that emotion.
And they filmed these.
They did. And then they showed videos of the 4 people's expressions to Western observers to see if they could recognize the intended emotions.
What did they find?
Well, the findings, while they've been debated and nuanced since then, considering cultural display rules and context, they provided strong early support for the idea that the facial expressions for these basic emotions were largely universal. It suggested a kind of innate, shared human language of emotion written on the face.
So if there's a universal language, you need a way to systematically describe it, right? To categorize it objectively?
Precisely. And that's where Ekman developed the Facial Action Coding System, or FACS.
FACS. Okay, what is that exactly?
It's incredibly detailed. Think of it as a comprehensive anatomical map of all the visually discernible individual muscle movements in the human face. He broke everything down into specific components called action units, or AUS.
Action units? Like building blocks?
Kind of like an alphabet for the face, yeah. Each AU represents a single muscle movement, or maybe a combination of tiny movements, like AU6 is the cheek raiser, which causes crow's feet around the eyes when you smile genuinely. AU12 is the lip corner puller, the main muscle for smiling.
Wow, that's specific.
Extremely. And the thinking behind it, especially looking ahead to computation, was potentially brilliant.
How so?
If you could painstakingly identify and map these precise muscle movements, these AUs, and then teach a computer to recognize them and their combinations, their intensities.
Then theoretically, you could teach the machine to recognize the underlying basic emotions Ekman proposed.
That was the idea. It offered this promise of turning the fluid, subjective world of human emotional expression into something quantifiable, something discrete, repeatable, a set of objective markers for computational modeling.
So this search for a structured universal code for the face, that was really the genesis of automated facial recognition trying to read emotions.
Very much so. It laid that groundwork.
But of course, human communication isn't just faces. We know that intuitively.
Not at all. And researchers knew it back then, too. Our voices carry immense emotional weight.
It's not just the words. It's how we say them. The tone, the pitch, the rhythm.
The speed, the pauses, the volume, all that paralinguistic information. It speaks volumes, often conveying emotional context the words alone miss or maybe even contradict.
Sometimes the real meaning is only in the voice.
Absolutely. Speech is fundamental, and it's incredibly rich in these nonverbal affective cues. It's the how, not just the what.
So the challenge there was similar to the face then. How do you quantify that?
Exactly. How do you turn those subtle, almost intangible shifts in sound, a quiver in the voice, a higher pitch, breathiness, a long silence, into something a machine can analyze, categorize, and understand as potentially indicating an emotional state?
Extracting meaningful features from audio signals sounds complex.
It was, and remains, a significant challenge.
Now this early focus on basic, universal emotions, decoding faces and voices. It seems like a necessary starting point, a simplification maybe?
It probably was necessary to get things moving, but yeah, it definitely sidelined the immense complexities of real-world human emotion.
Like mixed feelings or subtle expression.
Exactly. Or how culture influences how and when we show emotion. It inadvertently set the stage for a lot of the difficulties and limitations that came later when trying to build truly nuanced emotional AI. The models were based on a kind of idealized, simplified version of emotion.
It makes you think, how much do you rely on tone versus face when judging someone's feelings? It's often both, isn't it? Intertwined.
Absolutely, and often subconscious. If you are interested in content like this, we will discuss topics like this that have intrigued us every time we delve into these sources. Subscribe to the channel and follow us.
So we have these foundational ideas taking shape. ELIZA showing our readiness to connect, Ekman trying to decode the face with FACS, the recognition of voice cues, and then we hit the mid-1990s. A key moment arrives with Rosalind Picard at the MIT Media Lab.
Yes, Picard made what felt like a truly bold, almost radical declaration then. It really shifted the field's direction.
What did she propose?
She essentially stated, very directly, that computers needed to be able to understand and express emotions if they were ever going to be truly intelligent, genuinely helpful, and able to interact with humans naturally.
So not just using computers to study emotion, but making computers capable of understanding emotion themselves.
Precisely. And this led her to coin the term affective computing in her foundational 1995 technical report. She defined it as computing that relates to, arises from, or crucially influences emotion.
That sounds revolutionary for computer science back then. How was it received?
With a fair amount of skepticism, even outright resistance. She's spoken about it quite candidly, experiences like being literally laughed off stage at conferences when presenting these early ideas.
Really? Why such resistance?
Well, think about computer science in the mid-90s. It was heavily focused on logic, data processing, algorithms, information structure. The idea that messy, subjective, often seen as irrational human emotions belonged in that logical world. It was unconventional, heretical almost. It challenged the whole paradigm of what computation was supposed to be about.
But her motivation wasn't just a purely technical challenge, right? It seems like there was a deeper human-centric goal.
Absolutely crucial point. Her goals were very practical, even compassionate. One big area was improving product design.
How so?
She argued that if computers could recognize your emotional state, imagine your computer sensing your frustration or confusion as you're trying to use it.
Okay.
It could adapt its behavior, offer help proactively, change the interface, make the technology less infuriating and more intuitive. It was about making tech more human-aware, responsive to our internal state, not just our clicks and commands.
Making the tech adapt to us, not the other way around.
Exactly. And perhaps even more powerfully, she envisioned affective computing as a tool to help people who might struggle with understanding or expressing emotions themselves.
Like individuals on the autism spectrum.
Specifically, yes. The story she tells about a young woman named Jody is incredibly illustrative and still very compelling.
Tell us about Jody.
Jody, who had autism, used a wearable physiological sensor, a device that measured her skin conductance, that's a change in the electrical conductivity of the skin, linked to sweat gland activity, often triggered by emotional arousal or stress.
Okay, so it measured her stress levels, basically.
In a way, yes. But the key here was it wasn't primarily for a computer to analyze her. It was for Jody to understand herself.
Ah, interesting.
This objective, real-time physiological data helped Jody better recognize her own patterns of emotional arousal during stressful situations. It gave her concrete information about her internal state that she might not have easily perceived otherwise.
And that awareness helped her.
It did. It helped her and her friend communicate more effectively about what she was experiencing. It empowered her.
Wow. That really shifts the perspective. It's not just about machines reading us, but technology empowering humans to understand themselves and connect better.
Precisely. And around the same time, late 90s, these ideas started taking more tangible physical form with projects like Kismet.
Kismet, also from MIT Media Lab, right?
Yeah.
Developed by Cynthia Brazil, one of Picard's students.
That's right. Brazil became a leader in social robotics. Kismet was truly remarkable for its time. It wasn't just software. It was a physical robotic head specifically designed for social interaction.
What did it look like? What could it do?
It was intentionally given a very expressive face. It had mechanical parts controlling these large, movable eyes, eyebrows, eyelids, a mouth, even a little ear-like appendages that could perk up or droop.
So it could make facial expressions.
Yes. It was programmed to recognize some basic emotional cues in human faces and voices, like detecting a happy tone or a smile, and then respond with its own simulated emotional expressions. It used its facial movements and also synthesized vocalizations, more like expressive coos and babbling than actual language.
So it could look sad or interested.
Exactly. It could look sad by lowering its eyebrows, tilting its head, interested by widening its eyes, perking up its ears, surprised with wide eyes and raised brows. It tried to mirror basic affective states.
What was the main goal with Kismet? Was it trying to hold conversations?
Not really complex conversations, no. The ambitious goal was more about building a machine capable of engaging in the kind of proto-social emotional exchanges you see between, say, a parent and an infant.
Like reading facial cues, tone of voice.
Exactly. So much of that early infant-caregiver interaction is based on reading and responding to those simple cues, gestures, vocal tones. Kismet was an attempt to see if a machine could actually participate in that fundamental layer of human bonding and learning.
That feels like a huge step, moving from just recognition to building a physical thing that interacts emotionally, even in a basic way.
It was huge. It demonstrated an attempt to build machines that learn and interact in a human, relational way, even if it was rudimentary.
So affective computing, championed by Picard, demonstrated by things like Kismet and that sensor work. It really marked a significant pivot.
It truly did. It took the human element, our messy emotional lives, our need for connection, and placed it squarely as a central, legitimate problem for computer science to tackle.
The focus broadened. Not just smarter machines for logic and data, but machines interacting on a more human level, acknowledging feelings.
Yes, and that shift, while incredibly exciting and full of potential, immediately opened the door to immense new technical challenges and, crucially, profound new questions about the impact of this tech.
It makes you think, how might technology that actually understood your frustration change your daily interactions with it? Would it be helpful? Annoying?
It's a fascinating question to ponder. If this exploration into the history of emotional AI intrigues you, definitely subscribe to the channel and follow us for more detailed discussions like this one.
Okay, so we've got these foundational ideas. Ekman decoding faces, recognizing voice emotion, Picard launching affective computing. Now, researchers and engineers started thinking, okay, how do we actually use this stuff? Moving beyond lab demos to potential real-world applications.
Right. putting theory into practice. And one of the earliest and perhaps most significant areas they looked at was intelligent tutoring systems.
For education?
Exactly. The idea was incredibly appealing. Instead of just a static computer program delivering info and checking answers, imagine a learning program that could dynamically respond to how the student was feeling.
How'd that work?
The dream was a system that could detect if a student was getting frustrated because it was too hard, or confused because they didn't get it, or maybe bored because it was too easy.
And how would it detect that? Webcam watching faces.
That was one key idea, yes. Analyzing facial expressions via webcam using principles derived from Ekman's work, but also potentially analyzing vocal tone and hesitation if the student was speaking.
Okay.
Or even looking at interaction patterns, like, is their typing speed slowing down? Are their mouse movements erratic? Are they just staring blankly at the screen for ages?
Trying to infer the emotional state from behavior.
Right. And the goal wasn't just detection, it was action. If the system sensed frustration, maybe it offers a hint, simplifies the explanation, suggests a quick break.
And if it sensed boredom?
Maybe it presents a more challenging problem or introduces a related topic that might be more engaging. The vision was truly personalized education, adapting in real time, not just to your knowledge level, but to your emotional and engagement state.
Was it still being researched?
Oh, absolutely. The source material mentions it's still a major research area today, citing studies looking specifically at using facial expression tech to gauge student engagement in online learning, so very much still relevant.
Interesting. What other early applications were there?
Another area that saw promising early development, drawing on affective computing principles, was assistive technologies, particularly for individuals with autism spectrum disorder, or ASD.
Like we touched on with the Jody story earlier.
Exactly. The potential for technology to help people navigate complex emotional and social landscapes was a powerful motivator. Researchers developed robots, things like Infinoid and Keep-On.
Robots designed specifically for interaction with children with ASD.
Yes. People like Cosima and his team created robots with features intended to help these children improve emotional interaction skills, develop crucial social abilities they might find challenging.
How did the robots help specifically?
They often used simple, very clear, sometimes exaggerated expressive movements and maybe vocalizations. Think Kismet, but often simplified, less potentially overwhelming. So a robot might use really obvious eye movements to help teach joint attention, that fundamental skill where you and someone else share focus on the same thing, like you both look at a toy together.
That's critical for social learning, right?
Absolutely. The robots could also be programmed to respond very predictably to certain actions or sounds, providing a safe, consistent environment for kids to practice recognizing and responding to social cues and emotional expressions. Tangible attempts to make a real difference.
These early applications sound incredibly promising on the surface, making education better, helping with social development.
They did sound promising, but it quickly became apparent as these projects moved out of controlled labs into the real world that reading and responding to human emotions wasn't nearly as simple or straightforward as those initial simplified models suggested.
Yeah, reality bites, huh?
Pretty much. This is where the field really started crashing headfirst into the sheer complexity of it all. Rosalind Picard herself pointed out this fundamental ambiguity early on. Take a smile.
Right, you mentioned that. Not always happy.
Exactly. Is it genuine delight? Or is it a too light smile masking frustration? An embarrassed smile? Nervousness? Sarcasm? The exact same outward facial configuration can hide wildly different internal feelings and intentions.
And that's the absolute crux of it, isn't it? Human emotion is just messy.
Definitely messy. It's rarely a single, pure, isolated state fitting neatly into one of Ekman's basic boxes.
We often feel blends of things, right? Happy and sad at the same time.
Precisely. Excited and nervous. Grateful and resentful. And how we express emotion, or even if we express it outwardly at all, that's incredibly dynamic. It depends enormously on context.
Who are you with? Family?
Yeah.
Boss? Stranger?
Where are you? Home? Work? Public space?
Your cultural background must play a huge role, too.
Yeah.
Different display rules.
Huge role. Plus your personality, your physical state. Are you tired? Are you in pain? Your history with the person you're talking to. All these factors dramatically influence what we feel, how we show it, and how others interpret it.
So those early models, based on basic universal emotions and their direct expressions, they were just too simple for the real world.
They were a necessary starting point, but yes, the real world of human emotional interaction is infinitely more nuanced, layered, context-dependent, and complex than those initial models could possibly capture.
Which meant the engineering challenge hit a wall. An AI trained just to see a frown and log sadness would be wrong a lot of the time.
Constantly wrong, or at least missing the crucial nuance. Is that frown really sadness, or like we said, it's an intense concentration, disapproval, confusion, a headache?
So much ambiguity.
Exactly. And that ambiguity meant that simply decoding isolated signals, a face here, a voice pattern there, detached from the rich tapestry of context, was fundamentally insufficient for genuine emotional understanding.
So the quest had to evolve beyond just pattern recognition.
It absolutely had to. It required moving towards systems capable of inference, reasoning about what an expression or tone likely means given the whole situation.
Considering the context, who, where, why.
Yes, and handling ambiguity gracefully. Acknowledging multiple possibilities instead of locking onto one potentially wrong answer, this meant the problem wasn't just computer science anymore.
It needed psychology, sociology,
Anthropology. Insights from all these fields were needed to even begin modeling the richness of human emotional life, became deeply interdisciplinary.
And as the potential applications became clearer, even in these early stages, the ethical questions started popping up too, the Pandora's box you mentioned.
Oh, definitely. As soon as you start building tech that can sense frustration, stress, boredom, even imperfectly, you immediately think, what else could it sense? And critically, how could that information be used?
The privacy issue seems obvious.
It became apparent very early on. If a system can monitor and interpret your inner affective state, even just from outward cues, what happens to your personal privacy? The potential for constant monitoring, recording emotional responses, maybe without full awareness or consent.
Scary thought.
It is, and it's remarkable that Picard's own foundational work in affective computing acknowledged this sensitivity right from the start. She stressed the critical need for careful, ethical consideration and design alongside the tech development.
So it wasn't an afterthought.
No, not for her and others thinking deeply about it. These weren't just abstract worries. They touched directly on personal autonomy, the right to your own private inner world.
And then there's the problem of bias, which seems huge if decisions are being made based on these interpretations, like in those tutoring systems.
A massive issue. What happens if the AI misinterprets someone's emotion because their expression is shaped by cultural norms different from the training data?
If the data isn't diverse.
The AI will be biased. That's the core problem with a lot of emotion recognition technology, or ERT. If the datasets used to train these systems are skewed, maybe mostly one demographic, one culture, one gender, the technology will inevitably misinterpret emotions more often for people from underrepresented groups.
Leading to potentially unfair assessments or interactions.
Exactly. And the source material points out that later reviews, like Katira's, trace these issues of faulty bases and problematic premises of ERT back to these early, often Western-centric models and the lack of diversity in the initial training data. The roots of today's bias concerns were planted right back then.
So these complex ethical worries, privacy, bias, autonomy, who benefits, who might be harmed, they weren't necessarily front-page news in the 90s, but the concepts were there.
The seeds were definitely planted. The worry that even well-intentioned technology could be inaccurate or misused in ways that cause real harm. The fundamental power dynamic, the ability to read emotions, comes with the potential to use that information, and that use might not align with individual well-being or freedom.
It makes you think. If an AI could tell you exactly how a customer felt about your product or an employee felt during a meeting, how would that power feel? How would you ensure you used it ethically?
It's a heavy responsibility. If you are interested in deep dives like this, exploring topics that intrigue us every time we delve into the sources, please do subscribe to the channel and follow us.
So wrapping up this part of the journey, this early history we've walked through today, it really covers a lot of ground.
It does. From that unexpected human connection with simple chatbots like ELIZA, revealing our own deep need,
through the first scientific attempts by people like Ekman to decode faces and voices, trying to find a universal language,
leading to Picard's really bold vision for affective computing, integrating emotion into computing, and those first tangible creations like Kismet trying to interact emotionally.
And then almost immediately crashing into the profound messiness and complexity of real human emotion, and seeing those first glimmers of the deep ethical challenges.
That whole arc really did set the stage for everything that's followed in emotional AI research and development.
It feels like it perfectly encapsulates this enduring, maybe even relentless, human quest to bridge that gap between ourselves and our creations.
Trying to teach machines one of the most complex, nuanced, fundamentally human things about us, our emotional lives.
And that journey, with its stunning breakthroughs, its frustrating limitations when we hit the wall of human complexity, and those ever-present, maybe even tightening ethical tightropes.
That's precisely what's still unfolding right now, today.
It really makes you stop and think, doesn't it? As AI systems continue to get better, and they are getting better at detecting, interpreting, maybe even simulating our emotions, however they achieve that.
Yeah.
How will that fundamental shift change our relationship with the technology that's woven into almost every part of our lives now?
And maybe even more profoundly, how might it change how we understand ourselves or interact with each other? What does it mean when our inner states become potential data points for machines?
Lots to think about there.
Definitely. Subscribe to the channel and follow us to continue exploring these deep dives together.